Ladies and gentlemen, our speaker, Kathleen Harrington.
To project my voice to the very last I see it there, Sherry. But if I'm not projecting enough, let me know, because nothing annoys me more than going to hear somebody speak and not being able to hear them. And as I get older, I'm hearing less and less from one ear, so let me know. Okay, I have to be careful because at some talks I have been known to whack myself with the mic. I get so close and I was, whoop, there we go. So I was delighted to be asked to speak for the Whittier Writers Club, the Writers Club of Whittier, because I have a very dear affection for them. As Hong-Mi was saying, my first book was sold in 1989, and I had been attending for several years before that. So it's just an honor to be here today. A lot of my talk this morning is going to be kind of skewed toward writers, but those of you that are not writing or don't want to be published writers, it's an opportunity to learn something, because it's kind of different editors, because editors come and go, and the editor, that first book that I just love so much and learned so much from her, I actually took a hiatus, and I left for a while, and now she's at a different publisher. And the second editor that when I moved back, stepped away was the big publishers. That's who you sold to. And you needed an agent, generally speaking. And so when I came back, I had stepped away for a while. When I came back, social media had arrived. And I knew only what I would know working on a computer with first graders. So I didn't know a lot about computers, other than I couldn't compose a book, because I always worked on computers to write. But the social media was a new phenomenon. And when I went back, I also belonged to the Orange County chapter of Romance Writers. When I went back there to their, what they call their PAW, the Published Authors Workshop, they said, you're going to have to learn to use social media. And I think I shared with some of you that there for a while I was praying every morning, give me the strength to learn how to use social media to promote my book. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about that later for the people that are looking to be writing. When Hong-Mi asked me what I would talk about, and she kind of guided me to the trilogy that I had just finished, yes, indeed, I had said how to write a trilogy, and she suggested writing a threesome for the flyer. I said, oh, I don't know, because in my vocabulary, a threesome does not mean, that was their choice, and they always say, write what you love, and also male-male and female-female romance was also there in the club. And actually, it's a fantastic market. So if that's what you love, that's what you write. So we have all kinds of writers in the Orange County Romance Club, not just romances. But for me, the romance was male-female, and in the what we call traditional print market, the female and the male are both heroes. Okay, so that had changed from before, even when I started writing. If you think about Charles Dickens, and you think about his heroines, they're pretty wimpy. Okay, they reflected the Victorian idea of the ideal woman, and the ideal woman, of course, stayed home and raised children and took care of her husband. Only in greatest limitations. We don't have anybody that's perfect, because they make a pretty boring book. So my heroes tend to be that. I listen to a psychotherapist for the people that write the screenplays for the movies, and he came and spoke to us once, and he was talking about that too, and he said all writing is autobiographical.
You may not know it, but it is. You don't have to be writing a memoir to be expressing your subconscious. And so my heroes were my subconscious wish for a man who would be a loving husband and a loving father. And that father figure was so important to me, probably because of the father figures in my life who were so loving and so protective. So all of my heroes, but one that I can think of, and they weren't ready to have children because they were crossing the country again, not only as a lover, but also a provider, a strong man that will protect his family from anything. So all of this comes through your writing without conscious thought. This is just who you in your subconscious mind considers, the ideal person. The heroine, unfortunately, is not me, how I wish, but she's much braver than me, much smarter than me, and she can probably shoot a gun as good as Annie Oakley, one of my heroines, did. She can use the bow and arrow with accuracy, one of my heroines did. She can help the hero out if he needs help. So I write rather strong heroines and maybe subconsciously the person that I would really like to be. My other great love is history. I majored in social science with an emphasis in history. When I went to college, I always loved all settings of history, no particular one setting. Most romance writers in history have one setting. All of their books are about the Scottish Lairds, or all their books are set in Regency, and the hero is always a duke. Funny how that goes, a viscount at the very least. I did write a Regency, and my hero was a duke, but I've also written about an expedition across the West in 1836, and he was a half Cheyenne, half French minister, Rudolph Petter. So I moved from place to place and time to time, mainly because otherwise I get bored. I couldn't stay in the same place very long. I like different countries, and I like history. And my son has told me, Mom, he said, you steal from history. And it's true, because I usually have major events woven into the plot. In my book about Butte, Montana, and the mining, and the copper mining there, it started on July 4th with a riot in the town of Butte, which actually did take place. I went to Butte and read the old newspapers, and in those days, this was the mining days, the whole town erupted in a riot. And toward the end of it, a huge warehouse filled with dynamite exploded. That happened too, and it was one of the crises that happened in the book. So I take the events that happened and weave them around. In Lachlan's Bride, which was the middle of the trilogy, the whole thing is wound around Margaret Tudor going to Scotland to wed James IV. And everything that took place was wound around things that happened. I had a fire that in history, they never knew what caused that fire. In my book, it was the villains who had purposely tried to burn alive the hero. And I could do that because they never solved it, what started the fire in the stables that actually killed the Princess Margaret's favorite little horses. And the King of Scotland came with more of those horses, and that was in the book too. So the third book in the trilogy, I had to learn a whole lot about Sebastian plotting. And in Writers Talk, Writers Speak, there are two kinds of writers of fiction, and that's the pantsers, who just write by the seat of their pants. They might have an idea and see a scene in their mind, and off they go. And then there are plotters, like me, that write everything out. They know, they research it, they know just the main points of the story. If you're a pantser, that's great. There's nothing wrong with that. If there's somebody here that just sits and starts writing, that's cool. However, the pantsers that I know do a lot of rewrites because they start and they don't know where they're going. They have to go back and lay clues, or if it's a mystery or battle scenes or whatever, they have to know where they're going. With the trilogy, you have to be 3 times sure where you're going when you start writing. In my first book, in 1999, and then for personal reasons, I stepped away from writing. I had retired from teaching at 55, and I was going to just write full time. And I did for 2 years and 2 books, and that was the book. And then I took an honest look and I said, I think I better go back to teaching and get that teacher's pension pumped up. And that's exactly what I did. And when I went back, I was pretty exhausted. First of all, I found that staying home was not for me, because every day you face that computer screen. And I moved my computer from place to place in my house. I had been up in an extra bedroom. I moved down to the dining room to see out the windows. I moved down to another bedroom it was a tri-level on that bottom floor because I could look out to see through the patio. But it was not for me to just stay home and write. And so I said, I'm going to go back to teaching, which I did. And I went back and taught 9 more years, pumped up my pension, and now I can just write for fun and not feel the pressure. Because when you're just doing that, you have to stop and think. You have to put your own pension money away. If you're a writer, you're paid for that, but you have to pay for your own health benefits, your dental, your pension, and all of that has to come out of it. And so I decided to do that. So I did step back. So all the time that I had stepped back, and every time I talked to her, she said, well, Erica Sang, who was at the time I left an assistant editor, but I had worked with her. Erica Sang keeps asking, is Kathleen writing? Is Kathleen writing? I said, no, tell her no, I'm not writing. And so when I retired and had all of this time to look around the house, and here I was, and I thought, gee, maybe I'll go back to writing. And so because this editor had kept asking through those years, that was a good 9-10 years, about, I had left at the start of a trilogy, and so maybe I should see what I have on the computer. Opened up the computer, and the plot for the next book was right there. Because I'm a plotter, not a pantser. And when I started, I had the idea of a trilogy. So the heroine, the trilogy takes place over about 6 years of Scottish history, and the heroine the reader meets in the first book is 13 years old. She meets the hero. This is 3 brothers, and she and the third brother don't like each other one bit. He doesn't believe that she has. Now, I want to talk a little bit about writing a book. So those of you that are not writers, you're going to hear something about what writers think about. And that is that there's 2 main things that you do when you write fiction. First of all, Dennis Palumbo, who I mentioned before, who said all writing is autobiographical, he got me thinking about the subconscious and what is happening. But 2 other men were very, very important to what I learned about it. And one was a man called, and is a man called Michael Hay. If you're a writer, his name is spelled Hauge. You can Google him. He has a newsletter, and he speaks about plotting, and has a lot of, I don't know if he charges fiction. One is the character arc, or male and female character arcs, because each person has to grow. They're not the same person from beginning to end. And then the other is the plotting, that thing. And remember that all characters that are interesting are flawed, okay? And also, Michael Haga said, there's 3 things that you have to have in fiction: emotion, emotion, and emotion. If you're Stephen King, and you're writing horror, those people are so scared. In that middle of the book, you can't put it down. You might, go downstairs so you don't wake up your husband because you want to know what's going to happen. It's emotion, fear, and horror. If you write mysteries, you might have thrillers. If you write adventure stories, if you're characters, when they meet, they usually figure that no one, this would be the last person in the world I want to spend the rest of my life with. He's to this, she's to that, not what we're looking for. So you have to show their flaws and their character arcs and how they grow together. The other one is about the plotting, and that person that most influenced my writing, besides Michael Hay, was a man called Christopher Vogler, Volger. You can Google him. He wrote The Hero's Journey, based on the philosopher Joseph Campbell. Joseph Campbell is now deceased, but he was a philosopher. I believe he taught philosophy back in the New England area. But anyway, he studied all the myths in all the different countries, and then he wrote it. Now this applies also to screenplays and movie scripts, okay? So when you think about it, the ordinary world, let's take Star Wars, because almost everybody has seen Star Wars. They start with the ordinary world. Well, they start with that action-packed scene where they're trying to catch Princess Leia, but then we go to the hero, Luke Skywalker. It's his ordinary world. He lives on, I think it's Tatooine, wherever it is, and he has this ordinary thing. He's helping his aunt and uncle, and he knows Obi-Wan Kenobi as Old Ben, and Old Ben tries to bring him into being, part of the Star Wars, the heroes of the Star Wars, and he says, no. He has to help his aunt and uncle. That's the ordinary world. The call to adventure is when his aunt and uncle are killed, and off he goes. And maybe that's when he goes to Tatooine. So if you think about different movies that you're seeing, very often it's whatever. But he puts all of Joseph Campbell's work into plot points for writers. The Wise Old Man. In my stories, I always have a wise older person and a man and woman to advise. And you can see in my writing a subconscious coming out of my love for my grandparents coming out in the wise older people there. And they're the ones that say, don't be afraid, you can do it. Just like old Ben Kenobi. I'm going to talk to you about the force of this woman, because the hero thinks she's way above him. She's far too precious for anybody like me. And the mentor, the wise old man, is the one who tells you, go for it. you know. They're going to cross the threshold where they're leaving the ordinary world behind. They're going to go to the dangerous world where they have to meet their villains, their foes. There's going to be a supreme ordeal, often called a dark moment, and seizing the sword. I love action. Some of my favorite writers was Larry McMurtry in Lonesome Dove. I read Lonesome Dove and I thought, oh my God, I am going to write a story about a trip across the country and all of the things that they have to face. And so I started with that expedition. It was a topographical expedition across the country in 1836. They had, and I researched it. I had 5 years to write it because I hadn't sold a book, so you write it. Believe me, I had to cut. But they had quicksand that they crossed on the Platte River. They had sandstorms. They had attacks by other Indians. He was part Cheyenne, and they got into a Cheyenne village. We went off to the trappers, and so it was based on that thrill of Larry McMurtry. And also, I said, I'm going to write interesting characters, because his characters in there, his secondary characters, were just as interesting as the two heroes. And they were so memorable. I thought, I want to do that, and so I worked on that. And that was my first book that I ever sold. So let's see. Now I got to look at my notes because I always go off on a tangent and digress. But with Michael Hay, he talks about character arc, identity, and essence. So if you're a writer, write those two words down and look for Michael Hay. He speaks at different times. Get a chance to. Okay, identity is who the hero thinks he is. Okay? So in my first book, the hero is illegitimate. His parents had not married, and his father was killed on the battlefield before they were married, and he was born as a bastard. And his identity was, I am a fighter, I'm a warrior. I fight for my king. And if I am brave enough and conquer enough, I will get some lands, because I am a landless bastard. That's who I am. And through the story then, you see him with his character arc, and he realizes that he is worthwhile, but he has great agenda. She's a chief of the MacDonald clan, and we're going to bring him into the fold, so there won't be rebels. And so he meets her. Her identity is, I'm a half Scot, half English person. They don't believe in me. I want to be their chief, and I'm going to hate this guy because he's on the another clan, and she wants to have romantic love because she's listened to that. She was raised in England. She listened to the troubadours sing of romantic love, and he is absolutely the most unromantic man she's ever met. So both of them have that character arc, and both of them, she wants to not be married to him, have the marriage annulled, and he wants to be married to her to get her castle and lands. Not really. If you think about it, not a very nice motivation for a marriage, either one of them, but, you know. So, your identity is who the character thinks he is. The essence is who he really is, you know. And if you look at some of the movies of how they start, who they think they are, and how they change to their essence, their true inner self. So that's Michael Hay. He does work with Christopher Folger. They're both up in. When you're writing a trilogy, you have to make each book satisfying in and of itself. So even though the characters are interwound, each book at the end of it, you say, ah, that was nice. It ended good. All romances, by their very definition, end well. If it's not ending well, if the guy gets killed and falls off the cliff or whatever, then it's not a romance, okay? Romances have happy endings, optimistic endings, and when we judge, right now I'm judging for the, what's called the RITA, for the National Romance Writers. Right on the score sheet it says, was it an optimistic ending? Okay, did the lovers find each other? It's never a tragedy. You can have terrible things happen in horror stories and stuff like that, but this romance is satisfying. So each book in and of itself was satisfying, but left the clue for the next book to interweave. The very end, I thought I could either be a nurse or a teacher. That's all we knew. In our little sorority, there was a girl that was majoring in business. And we thought, oh my God, what is she going to do? Well, later I said she was probably vice president or president of the company, because she got in on the ground floor of that. But I didn't want to be a nurse because, first of all, I'm not really good with, like blood and shots and stuff. And then they also, at the hospital, they had to work nights. So I'll be a teacher. Well, mumbling and stumbling as I did, I happened to go into my calling. And I remember reading a research, people that know me that I'm always talking about something in the LA Times that's a research. But it said that there are three kinds of people. The kind that it's a job and a paycheck. And that's all they're interested in, a job and a paycheck, job and a paycheck. The other is a career. They want to get to the top, they want to make the most money, be the best lawyer that was ever at their firm. It's a career. And the third people, it's a calling. They are called to do whatever it is. If it's real estate, they're a people person, and they're listening to what the person wants and what the person needs, and they go out of their way to help them. For me, teaching was a calling. I took to it like a duck to water. First year, first grade, 39 kids, believe it or not, back in Michigan. But I loved it, and I came back to California and was in the public school system here for 40 years. I taught 2 years in the public schools back in 1 year in Michigan and 1 year in Ohio. So I was perfectly content until one day in my 40s, my sister said, I'm going to take a class called How to Write a Romance. I said, I'll take it with you. Then I started thinking about it, and I always wrote to a friend from 8th grade in Iowa, and I still do all these years, we still write. And when she heard that I had a book published, she said, you used to tell us stories, and when we went on trips, you would entertain us by making up these stories. I said, you're right, I remember, because the car was a carriage with horses. And we were going to someplace really good, and I would tell these stories. And then I remember in high school, first of all, I did get in trouble. My brother was a math whiz, but he sucked at writing. I was good at writing, but man, and he would help me before those geometry tests, and we would go over it, and then on the test, they turn the triangle around. Didn't you relate to that? I would have had it, but they inverted that triangle and I went left. Well, he hated to write essays. We went to a Catholic school, and in those days it was all nuns and priests. The only lay people were the coaches. And so I said, okay, I'll write that. He said, Kathleen, please. Because usually his book reports were based on the comics, the classics. Okay, So I wrote that. So Sister Callistus called him up. She was a little tiny thing, black hair and all white. And she said to Tony, she said, after class, she said, who wrote this for you? And the jig was up. And he said, my sister, my little sister, she said, Tony, who wrote this for you? He said, my little sister. She couldn't believe it. I don't know if she ever did. I had her next year. I wrote an essay, and she called me up. She said, Kathy, what's a kaleidoscope? And I said, no, it's one of those things you look through and you move things and all the colors change and stuff. She said, oh. Yeah, she said, you're Tony's sister, aren't you? Because I had used kaleidoscope in the essay, and she didn't know if I had really written that. And when I knew exactly what it was, when I said something was like looking through a kaleidoscope. So the other thing I remember is in class, and we're whispering back and forth, and we're talking, we're writing stuff, and one of my good friends said, when you grow up, you're going to be a writer. And I said, to me, being a writer was like being a rocket scientist. The people on those high echelons that actually wrote stories for a living and stuff like that, I never thought of it. But those things started coming back, and I realized, yeah, I guess I was meant to be a writer too. And when I get mail from people, emails, and now on my website, but I still get also stamp mail. One lady that writes to me, she takes my covers and she makes that into a card, and then you open it up and she says, I love everything you write. I've read it so many times, and when my friends ask me about a scene, I know exactly which book it is and everything like that. And one time I heard someone speak at the Romance Writers, and she said, you know what? What we do is important. I got a letter from someone whose husband was very, very ill. I don't know if he had cancer or what, but this lady had sat by his side day after day, and she was reading a romance, and how that helped her get through those sad times by reading these optimistic stories filled with love, because very often we'll have children in them, heart donors in them, the contemporary stories, you name it. They've covered up everything. And so what we do is important by what we bring and what we tell. And it is also a calling. So I guess I'm lucky that I've had two callings. And I remember telling about that research to my doctor, who I've gone to for years, because his was a calling too. He'll sit down. He's not a doctor that stands, waiting to leave the room. He comes in. It's Dr. Marchioli. Some of you know him. He comes in and he sits down. When he comes in, he goes, well, how are you? And I say, I'm fine. How are you, doctor? And he thinks that's funny, because most people come in and immediately tell him what's wrong. But he sits down. He visits. I tell him about my dog being sick, and he shares. And so I had to tell him that, because it was like, that's his calling. That's why he's here on this earth, is to be a doctor. And part of it is to take care of me. He's going to retire soon. I've always been worried, but I know somehow I'll find another really good doctor. So value what you do. It's a lot of fun. We tend to think it's just for us. Yes, Cindy.
I have a friend who has read my books and wanted to be here today, couldn't unfortunately. But I was surprised to find that her husband also reads your books and enjoys them. I didn't know men read romances.
Yes, thank you.
About that when you're writing?
I try not to. And I say I write for women, but when I saw my editor in July, she told me that she wants me to write not historical romance, but historical fiction. She said that is your voice. That's your true voice, is historical fiction. And I thought about it because in this book, she edited out